Can we talk about something like trauma bond for a second? Isn't it kind of messed up that so many of us were traumatized as kids by the idea of eternal hell? We were just trying to be good, trying to make sense of the world, but instead of being taught how to connect with love, we were taught how to fear God. Narrow is the gate. Only 144,000 get in. By the way, is that forever or just in the end times? Lukewarm believers will be spit out. Many are called, but few are chosen. And you start asking, am I one of the chosen? And if I am, how do I know I'm choosing this? How does any of that even make sense? So you try to believe hard enough. You pray the right way. You do everything you're told. But deep down, you still feel unsafe. Still wonder if you'll be punished forever just for getting it wrong. That is not love. It's spiritual trauma disguised as truth. And for some of us, the most liberating moment wasn't reconnecting with faith. It was finally saying what we were never allowed to say out loud. What if Christianity as we know it is a lie? Not God, not love, but the system, the fear, the manipulation, the doctrine built to control instead of connect. And the irony is, the moment you let that crumble, you don't fall into darkness. You find light. You find peace. You find God. Not in a book or a building, but in the quiet truth already alive inside you. That's what today's conversation is about. John Rainey was a teaching pastor who spent decades inside the system until one question about eternal hell cracked it wide open. And what followed was a complete spiritual awakening and a return to divine love, free from fear. He's the author of Finding God, Losing God, Becoming God, and host of the upcoming, maybe out now, podcast, House of St. Rainey. So in this episode, you'll learn how to navigate the fear and freedom of questioning your faith, why letting go of hell might be the most spiritually honest thing you do, and a deeper perspective on forgiveness, ego, and reclaiming your inner divinity. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys, workplace stress is killing us. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal. So if you're feeling it, you are not alone. I used to think I could just push through everything, work harder, sleep less, pretend I had it all figured out, but that approach nearly broke me. I am all about following your joy. If that voice in your head is telling you to make a change, listen to it. Maybe you are ready to quit your job. Maybe you do need to flip your whole life upside down. But either way, you need support and tools to navigate it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without feeling guilty, how to manage anxiety before it spirals, how to make big moves from a place of strength instead of desperation. And BetterHelp has over 30,000 therapists and has helped 5 million people worldwide. And you can talk to someone from your couch. No waiting rooms, no awkward scheduling. Therapy gives you the clarity on whether that voice telling you to make a change is your intuition or just the Sunday scaries. But either way, you deserve support. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Let me ask you something. How much time did you spend last week thinking about what to eat? Planning meals, making grocery lists, wandering around the store like a lost tourist. I used to waste entire Sunday afternoons on this, and it was exhausting. Then I found Hungry Root. Hungry Root fills your cart with personalized picks and plans your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. They have over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, and most are ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm actually headed to Michigan this week, and I had my Hungry Root order delivered there. So I already know that I have meals ready and plenty of snacks for the kids without scrambling to find a grocery store. It's just handled. And what I love most is their smart cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements just for me. So no more buying spinach that rots in my fridge. They screen out over 200 additives and only source high quality ingredients. The time I've gotten back has just been life-changing. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE.
When you identify with the worldly sense of self, it's all about me. You hurt me, you offended me, and this is what triggers ego. This is what triggers the fear responses, the shame response, the desire, the pride, all these sorts of things. Once you transcend that worldly sense of self, once you understand what the ego is and the identification with the worldly sense of self, and you shift your awareness to a higher sense of self, your spiritual sense of self, now all of a sudden, you're not so focused on what hurts me or my experience. You're focused on what you're here to do, the higher expression of self, having a human experience. That's what we're all here to do. All judgment for everyone else is released. It's gone.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So I've been following you on Instagram and I just love everything you put out. I'm sure you get that a lot. It feels like the topic that you covered, there's a lot of people that are emotionally invested in it, but I'm curious because it seems most people I talk to, these life-changing decisions or the path that we find ourselves on starts with a moment, like a realization that the story you were living wasn't the one you were meant to tell. For you, what was that moment that put you on this path?
Oh man. Yeah, there's actually been multiple hugely pivotal moments. But if I had to trace it back to the initial one, my background is like very strict conservative Christianity. And I would say that the first real pivotal moment was when I was just contemplating different theologies on salvation. I was a Protestant, but I was contemplating eternal hell for other brands of Christianity. And in that contemplation of really comparing my theology of salvation with the Catholic's theology of salvation, comparing the two of that was kind of the initial launching pad for me. And then that unraveled these contemplations on hell, which was something that I believed in my entire life, but I just like never really fully considered it from a human just perspective. It was always just trusting in the Bible and in the Christian way. But then when I started to really contemplate the ramifications of the belief of there being an eternal hell, then the Christian faith just really started to deteriorate. And so that was kind of the initial launching pad of my journey.
And what was coming up for you that were inconsistencies or not really fitting when you sat with it?
Yeah, it all started when I was walking my baby. Well, he's 6 now, but at the time I was walking around this Catholic church, and honestly, the thought just popped into my head. I was hearing like this beautiful worship coming out of the windows, and I just started to contemplate what would happen if an extremely lovely, devout Catholic person had passed away and met God face to face. What would God say? And it was really just marching through that contemplation and my belief that there's no way that the infinite God of love could tell this person, based off of your theology, depart from me, I never knew you. And I just couldn't believe that. But then it immediately launched me into this brainstorm of like, well, I believe that Protestants and Catholics will join together in heaven. What about the less traditional Christian beliefs like Mormonism or Jehovah's Witness or things of that nature? It all just like really unraveled very quickly, because then I was thinking like, how, quote unquote, how bad could your theology be? And then that just went so far. And then I also picked up the book That All Shall Be Saved by David Bentley Hart, which is all about Christian universalism. That really, and by the time I was halfway through that book, my beliefs in eternal hell had just completely collapsed. But when that happened, then I immediately thought, what's the point? If every single person is saved, what exactly is Jesus saving us from? If not from eternal hell, what is he saving us from? And so then that was kind of the trajectory. That I didn't realize how important it was for me to hold this belief of eternal hell, but it was like a pillar that collapsed, and that freed me into a really expansive, pretty insane spiritual journey.
It's so interesting because I think my awakening also started with questioning hell. But I remember questioning it much younger, before I was fully questioning everything about Christianity. Well, I guess that happened pretty young too. But I remember the conversation would come up quite a bit because my grandparents consider themselves Catholic, and my grandpa goes to church sometimes on Sundays, but they're not. It wasn't like my parents, where we pretty much lived in the church like 5 days a week, and so I remember thinking at like when I was in the single digits of age, like, I have to save my grandparents. Like, they can't go to hell. And I couldn't reconcile this idea that there's no sadness in hell, or in heaven, but you can be in heaven and know that your loved ones are being eternally tormented. And it's not just like this place where, you're waiting. It's like you're going to be tortured, or whatever the things we've all made up over time have been. And I just couldn't really resonate that. But then also this idea, I remember coming across the verse in either middle school or high school, where I think it's Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And so then I started thinking, if souls are eternal and God knew me before this lifetime, eternal is a really long time, which means a lifetime is such a blip, such a small blip. And then we're also human, making human mistakes. And so that's the game. It's forever, eternity. And then you're here for 1 second. And if you screw it up, we're going to throw you in hell for the rest of eternity. And we're going to actually torture you, like hang you by your balls. Like, you know what I mean? Like horrible things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I don't know if I went quite that direction, but no, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. I mean, when I was reading this book, and I would say, like, what really just, my belief just immediately collapsed, when I was just contemplating, it was really the moral intelligibility of an eternal hell. It was, we are humans here. This finite temporary experience, maybe, whatever, 60, 70 years, whatever. And we're granted free will. And so we're finite creatures with finite actions. How could it possibly be morally justifiable for us to experience infinite punishment? Finite beings, finite actions cannot justifiably demand eternal infinite punishment. And so that collapsed instantly for me. I was like, that, not only does that not make any sense, especially like morally speaking, it's a moral abomination. Like that's where I ended up. I ended up getting to this point where I was like, oh, it can't exist. Well, there's other reasons why I believe it can't exist. But in terms of there being a God of infinite love and grace and mercy and all this beauty, eternal hell became a moral abomination that it just seems virtually impossible to me.
So you described a fear and a liberation when you were questioning your Christian beliefs. Can you walk us through the internal conflict and where you took it?
Oh man, yeah, I was so intensely connected to my Christian faith. And I was reaching this point of my Christian faith was softening, and I was contemplating a different story of spirituality. And as that was unfolding, these thoughts, the Christian fear persisted in thinking, if I let go of this Christian faith, what if Christianity is the truth? Am I consigning myself to an actual hell forever? And that is such a difficult hurdle for the Christian to overcome, because eternity in hell. I mean, like, this is the most terrifying thought a person could have. And so, there was a lot of fear associated with that. Now, for me, when that fear was released, for me personally, in my own contemplations of my relationship with my son. So I view my son, and I have so much love for him. And it's not based on anything that he has done or does or will do. I just love him based purely on who he is. And there's nothing that he could do that would cause me to want to banish him from my presence forever. So as I started to contemplate that, and then I started to think about my relationship with my God, who from the Christian tradition, I viewed as a father. And I thought, how much more is the source of love? What greater capacity does the source of all love have for me? You know, I started thinking, am I more loving than God? That might sound like a really radical thing, but all I'm saying is, in this contemplation of my relationship with my son, I was like, well, there's nothing that he could do. I mean, he's not perfect. He can be a bad listener sometimes, but I love him equally. It doesn't matter if he's a good listener or a bad listener. That doesn't matter. And so I'm like, there's no way. There's no way that I could possibly be more loving than God. Right there, that became that freed me from a lot of the fear, a lot of the bondage to fear. That, for me personally, was a really powerful moment. And then I did spend quite a number of an extensive period of time in a dark night of the soul. And that came with a lot of fear and confusion as well. And what released me in that season was my determination to seek truth by going inward. When I did that, there was a lot of existential crisis and spiritual anxiety. But when I took my journey inward and I started to really meditate on love, joy, and peace, what ended up happening was love, joy, and peace came. Those higher vibrational energies started to rise up as I just focused and meditated on that. And when you do that, when I did that, the more that love rises, fear subsides. And so that was kind of my relationship with fear. There was a lot of fear early on, the fear of being an apostate, the fear of what if I'm wrong? And then that contemplation about my son helped me release those fears. And the inner journey, meditating on love, really it additionally really silenced the fear. And then when I felt that liberation, then it was just like, okay, here I believe that there is a God. I'm connected to this God in some way, and unconditional love is the path. Those were like the only beliefs that I had in the dark night of the soul. Those were like the foundational beliefs I had. But when the fear was subsided, well, then it's just game time. And then it's just like, okay, here's what we have. Now let's continue to contemplate and really think through what the ultimate truth is. And it's just been a journey of doing that ever since. And that's just what I plan on doing for the rest of my life. But yeah, the fears are completely vaporized, you know. It's just been a continual journey of raising vibration and just like spirit communion and alignment and fear in terms of, you know, spirituality or my belief in God. The fears are a thing of the permanent past.
It reminds me of that quote by Rumi. I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God. And I had such a similar experience to you of the stages of like what it meant. And I remember searching more broadly and finding these quotes and thoughts that I could feel in my soul. It was like I'd get the chills or the physical sensations that I knew I was on the right track, but then there would be the thought, okay, yeah, but what if I'm wrong? What if I
Mhm.
end up in hell? So it's like I'd always do this little prayer to Jesus on the side just to
Mhm.
make sure. And then I asked the same questions as you, like, okay, so it's not unconditional love then, if this is what the cage is that we're in. And then I remember at one point, after enough distance, going back to the Old Testament, and I was like, let me just read this from the beginning with a sort of new understanding. And I started reading and I thought, oh, wow, God is kind of a murderous psychopath in this
Mhm.
Old Testament. So
Mhm.
maybe it's not full of love. So then one of these has to be wrong. Either the Old Testament is not like, either this isn't completely cohesive and everything's inspired by God, or this one verse is wrong. Like, and so either way, there's got to be some sort of incongruence with
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
I'm being told, that God is love and patience and kindness and all of these other things. And so when that opened up, and I remember there was a moment where I was actually asking for guidance. I was just like, okay, just show me then. I'm willing to follow whatever. No ego at all. I'm not trying to prove something wrong. I just want to know what the truth is. And I just got this voice that said, you misunderstand my role. And this moment I was praying to Jesus. I was
Mhm.
just like, what does that even mean? And I thought I just made it up. And the very next day I was at a coffee shop and I overheard somebody talking about the exact idea. And they're like, well, I just realized I misunderstood Jesus' role. And so I immediately popped up and I was like, what? Oh my gosh, what is happening? And then the guy started talking about Bart D. Ehrman. So I was like, I must read
Mhm.
all of his books. And I've read like 12. And so, and I just, it was that trust that I needed where I'm like, okay, this isn't me searching outside. I literally asked this question. It was delivered to my lap. I'm going to
Mhm.
follow this with everything that I have. And then through that and reading those books and then randomly finding other people and just reading the books that they mentioned, I feel like I have a cohesive understanding. There's no more holes in the story like I always felt growing up.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the universe is so cool. I like synchronicities like that. And what I've experienced, I'm sure that you've experienced the same, is like the further you get along in like the conscious spiritual awakening journey, you get synchronicities like that all the time. It's just like, yeah, coincidences are like, you just don't believe in coincidences anymore. It's just like there's so many spectacular synchronicities that happen just like that. So it's so incredible. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see how, you know, all these different journeys from different perspectives can end up converging into this same path. And it sounds like you and I maybe have had some similar experiences coming from that Christian tradition and even taking similar but still kind of distinct paths. Your path may have been through Airmen, mine went through Bentley Hart, or whatever. But yeah, it's really interesting. But then also, like you said too, really pursue, once you really like dive in, you listen to those intuitive hits, those intuitive voices that say something that might not even make sense in the time or whatever. And you explore it, you keep diving into it. My experience, I'm sure that yours is similar. It sounds like you just get clearer and clearer. You get more love, more peace. Things start to make way more sense. Like even when you're talking about the Old Testament and the God of the Old Testament and things like that, it's just like I completely resonate with those feelings that you had. But now I see things so differently, and even like who Yahweh is, and and what how to read the Bible and how that unfolds. It's really a spectacular journey. And the deeper that you get into it, the more clarity and peace you get. At least that's my experience.
I agree. What has changed with how you used to read the Bible compared to now?
Okay, so yeah, for 30, I was a Christian for about 30 years. I went to Bible school. I was a teaching pastor for 6 years. And that whole time I interpreted the Bible in very traditional Protestant way. And that is really Generally speaking, it's very literal. It's very historical. So let's just when you look at the story of Jesus, for example, as a Protestant, I read it as if I like to say, lately I've been saying this a lot, but I like to say that I used to read it as like an ancient newspaper. Like, here is what happened. Here are the facts. Here are the miracles that Jesus performed. When you read it very hyper literally like that, you get a different truth. You get a different outcome. The outcome is Jesus of Nazareth is the only way to God. You must believe in his life, his death, his resurrection, so that you can go to heaven, and there is no other way to be in relationship with God. That's kind of the literal historical approach. That's like the ancient newspaper approach. I have since learned and accepted the mythological approach, which says that the Bible is a mythology. And so it's meant to be read through a metaphorical framework. And when you do that, then you're able to recognize higher spiritual truths. And interestingly, it's a very subtle shift in interpretation, actually. But this subtle shift of interpretation from ancient newspaper to spiritual story, just that shift in interpretation makes the biggest difference that you could ever imagine. The ancient newspaper approach gives you Protestantism or Catholicism in that way. And this is no judgment, by the way, if anyone reads it in that way or if they have those beliefs. This is just presently how I view the Bible. It's just an interpretive difference. When you read it as an ancient newspaper, though, you get that traditional exclusive belief that does come with a lot of fear, a lot of shame. It comes with separation from God and division between humanity. When you take the mythological, metaphorical approach, what you actually come to see is Christ consciousness. You learn what Jesus was really here to teach. You take a completely different approach to his life, his teachings, his miracles. And what's really interesting, actually, with this interpretive approach, I have found that you can actually believe that all of his miracles historically happened, or you could believe that Jesus wasn't even a real person. It really doesn't matter what you believe about Jesus. The symbol remains the same. So you look at and this might sound wild too, but I actually personally do believe in the miracles of Jesus. I actually believe in the resurrection. But this is key though. I don't insist that it happened. It doesn't matter if it happened. What matters is the symbol of the crucifixion and the resurrection. It's not taking that literal approach that this is the one atoning death that covers all of my sin and saves my soul and saves me from hell. That's the literal approach. But if you understand it as in, we really do need to completely, brutally annihilate our worldly sense of self. And it will feel like an absolute death. This is the death of the ego. This is the death of the worldly sense of self, your identification with the worldly sense of self. Once you do that, you are reborn into a completely different kind of person, a completely different kind of awareness. Really, it's expanded awareness. And then you understand your own spirit nature, your own oneness with the Father. So anyways, kind of a long-winded answer to your question there. I take a mythological approach now when I interpret the story of Jesus.
What I come back to time and again, I'm so grateful that I have studied marketing in my time because it helps me understand. One of the first things that you learn in marketing, which I'm sure my listeners have heard time and again, is people aren't moved through logic, they're moved through story. And so given that and the idea that Jesus literally said he speaks through parables because people are going to interpret that parable in different ways depending on what they need. It's going to activate something different in each person. And then I take the idea that we are all fractals of God coming for a particular experience, perspective. Like we are the spectrum. Not only does that help me identify or understand and honor people with different perspectives. Cause I'm like, you know what? Your perspective is needed. It's the exact opposite of mine, but it's needed if God's going to experience everything.
Yes.
And also that what's being moved in you, what you need for your own understanding, if that's different for each person because the story unlocks something different, it's doing exactly what it should. And so that's how I look at Bible stories now. It's like, okay, yeah. Oh, that's what you interpret? That's amazing. Whereas before, with my original Christian understanding, somebody understanding something about my beliefs differently than me was a threat to my idea of salvation. It's like I had to convince people and bring people to my side. Otherwise, what if I'm wrong about all of this?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, as a Christian, you feel that pull, that draw, that like, I mean, you have this path to heaven, and I can really, honestly, I can really appreciate that Christians want to share their truth with others. In all honesty, I think that they should. If a Christian it firmly believes that they are they have the lifeboat to heaven and everyone else is going to hell, in demonstration of love, they should be telling every single person that they know about Jesus. Now, of course, I don't hold that belief. It's a much more expanded belief in terms of hell and heaven, who God is, who we are, etc. But yeah, it's just it's something that you can really come to resonate with, that you can really appreciate the Christian's approach, their understanding of God and wanting to proselytize. But also, it's the further that you take the path of unconditional love, the less judgment you experience. Loving yourself and loving others unconditionally, there's no, when you learn to no longer judge, you will no longer be judged, right? Jesus says this loud and clear. And so anyways, it's just this, it's an interesting path of this unconditional love without judgment that I can't find a way to reconcile a traditional Christian belief with true unconditional love and honoring free will. Like you said, there could be someone with a completely different belief system than you. And this is beautiful. We need this. We need this diversity for all these infinite expressions of God. We need that limitless experience. That's just what we're here to do. But when you take that path of unconditional love and non-judgment, and you begin to really see what Jesus was really talking about when he's talking about oneness with the Father and inviting everyone into that exact same oneness of deep personhood, of spirituality, of spiritual essence, I don't know how you could maintain the Christian belief from that point.
It reminds me of that quote by Rumi. I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God. And that's exactly how it felt for me, because my awakening didn't come all at once. It was like waves over time. And I remember searching more broadly, coming across quotes and ideas and things that made me light up, and I'd get chills, like full body knowing, like this is truth. But even then, there was always this little voice in the back of my head, like, what if I'm wrong? What if I end up in hell for this? So just in case, I'd do this little side prayer to Jesus, like a backup plan. And I remember asking the same questions that you were. If this is supposed to be unconditional love, how the hell does hell fit in? Pun intended. So years later, it was actually about 5 years ago, I went back to the Old Testament with fresh eyes, and I thought, let me start from the beginning and see what lands now. Maybe I'll see things with a new interpretation. But honestly, I was shook because God came across less like love and more like a psychopathic dictator, like total wrath, control. And I remember thinking, this doesn't match the God that I've come to know, or even the God that we're told about in religion. And so the question became, either the Bible isn't one cohesive, divinely inspired book, or this version of God isn't the full story. And so that was a big turning point for me. And one night I was praying, completely open, no ego, just show me the truth and I'll follow it. I don't care what it is. And I just got this voice that said, you misunderstand my role. And the vision with it was Jesus. But I honestly thought I made it up, like it was my imagination or something. But the very next day, I was at a coffee shop and I overheard this conversation. I will never forget this. And I heard someone say, I just realized I misunderstood Jesus' role. And I turned, like, what is happening? And he started talking about Bart D. Ehrman. And right then I knew I was supposed to follow this thread. So I just started gobbling up Bart Ehrman books. I've read at least 12 of his books by now. And each one filled in a gap that I didn't even know I was missing. And for the first time in my life, the story made sense. No more holes, no more fears, just truth. But looking back, I can also see the version of me who needed to convince everyone else. The version who believed my truth had to be the truth. And I thought I was doing it from love, but really it was just fear faked as certainty, which honestly feels like this sneaky kind of spiritual narcissism, which I know you talk about.
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
Well, tell us about what spiritual narcissism is, because for some reason that term keeps popping in my head when I'm thinking of this conversation where it's like, yeah, well, explain. You explain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I haven't really put a lot of contemplation into it, spiritual narcissism, I guess. Yeah. So I guess, I don't know. I haven't really thought a whole lot about it. What are your thoughts on spiritual narcissism? And maybe we can kind of like bounce back and forth. I just kind of view it obviously there's a lot of, self-centeredness. There's a lot, and it's no judgment. It's just the experience that we're here to have. But there's a lot of that kind of self-centeredness and attachment with the worldly sense of self. And so when you're identified as the individual separate being, God's out there, I'm down here, I'm here, you're there, and there's that separation, there's that division. Identifying with the worldly sense of self, which includes that identification with the ego, which in terms of spiritual narcissism can happen on the spiritual path if you're not careful, because obviously the spiritual ego can be very deceptive. But there is this shift in awareness when you go from the individual, that worldly sense of self that is completely focused on who you are as an individual, then releasing that completely in the realization, I'm actually an individual expression of spirit, and so is everyone else. I think, or at least when this term comes up in my mind, that's kind of where my mind goes. It's a completely different self-identification of when you identify with the worldly sense of self, it's all about me. You hurt me, you offended me. And this is what triggers ego. This is what triggers the fear responses, the shame response, the desire, the pride, all of these sorts of things. Once you transcend that worldly sense of self, once you understand what the ego is and the identification with the worldly sense of self, and you shift your awareness to a higher sense of self, your spiritual sense of self, now all of a sudden, you're not so focused on what hurts me or my experience. You're focused on what you're here to do, the higher expression of self, having a human experience. That's what we're all here to do. All judgment for everyone else is released. It's gone. Because we're all the same. We're all the same essence, just different physical manifestations of that. But this shift in conscious awareness of who we are and what we are doing, it completely releases you from that worldly attachment. That worldly attachment that is really focused on self, which is, again, that's what we're here to do. So there's no judgment in doing that. But once you release that, and perhaps this is a form of releasing or a form of that narcissistic experience of who you identify as. And that shift in conscious awareness changes absolutely everything. And then I'm sure that you're probably like-minded here in that realization and in this expanded spiritual awareness. When you are experiencing these higher vibrations of love, joy, and peace, and you're interacting, you have a broader perception of what truth actually is, which is that we are all one, just having individual experiences. Now, at least I can speak for myself, is I'm so others focused in terms of, because I believe the truth is found in unconditional love and service for others. That's just how I believe that life is meant to be lived. Unconditional love for self and others, and pursuing your optimal life path, which in my mind is, there's a spiritual maturity piece, but then also like vocationally, for example, it's following your bliss and serving others. And serving others by following your bliss. And so I guess all that to say, it's very others focused type of experience in the realization that we're actually all one. So I don't know. I guess that's what I think of when I hear that term and kind of contemplate on that.
Yeah, that all resonates with me. And I'm seeing it as like, if I were to have taken the mirror on how I felt with other people at any part of my spiritual journey, it's a pretty good indicator of how close I am to the path of truth. For example, deep into Christianity, it was, I have to save you. You have to believe these exact things. Oh, wait, you're close, but you're actually off on this. Oh, no, you're still going to go to hell. Like, like you actually go to church every week, but it's the wrong church or whatever it is. Like, to me, that is the epitome of spiritual narcissism. Then the second part would be when I was a little bit further on my group growth, it was all about self-transformation, which I think was really important, but it was like another phase of it. And then I got to the oneness where I'm like, actually, what happens to anybody else also is happening to me. We're all one. Mm-hmm. Every path is valid, even if it looks completely wrong to me. Even that homeless person might be doing exactly what they're meant to be doing in this world, and it is just as valid and honorable as my path. And so, and also, no one can be wrong. They can just be suffering or not. And I think that ended up being a big distinction for me also, because then it's not necessarily about, like, there's still an option of saving people, but it's never about me or rightness or righteousness anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And there's this realization that everyone's their own savior. And everyone's in control of their own energy, their own free will. That was huge for me too. In that realization of just, so like for me, my bliss, like my optimal life path, serving others by following my bliss, is writing and teaching these like spiritual truths. But I do that with no expectation of outcome because I have the realization and I honor everyone's free will. And I believe that everyone, whatever truth you accept in the moment, is the truth that serves the individual who chooses it. So there's a Christian, for example, a Christian would tell me that I'm wrong or that I'm a heretic, that I'm a blasphemer. I actually view the Christian as right where they need to be. The Christianity is serving them right where they're at. And I believe that the more and more and more that they pursue unconditional love for self and others, inevitably you reach these pivotal moments in your journey, like what we started this whole conversation about, these pivotal moments. If you are really dedicated to the path of unconditional love, if you can truly learn to love the person who hurt you the most, your enemy. We don't use the word enemy, but we can all resonate and imagine and think of readily the person who hurt you the most. Okay, when you get to the point where you can love that person unconditionally with no judgment and actually have compassion and gratitude for them, then you understand the path of unconditional love. Or at least, maybe more precisely here, you understand the depths to which unconditional love can go. For me, in my Christian experience, it reached a ceiling. I had a love for humanity, definitely. Like, my life was like serving others in the Protestant way. I had a love for humanity, but there were certain individual relationships and traumas that I endured where Christianity had a ceiling. I couldn't break through. I could never have found supreme love, compassion, forgiveness, gratitude, and love for the person who hurt me the most. I couldn't do that within the Christian framework. It's exploring the depths to which unconditional love can go. That's when you find the miracle of forgiveness, which comes in that shift of conscious awareness. We're actually all one, just having unique experiences. So now in this realization, traumas can shed, and you can find, for me, the energy of supreme love overwhelmed me. When I was trying to forgive this person that I was struggling to forgive, but I was like on this spiritual path, and I was like, I need unconditional love. I'm not sure how to forgive this person. I need to discover unconditional love, though, because I know that resentment doesn't have any place in the higher levels of consciousness, and I do want to spiritually mature. Absolutely. The dedication towards unconditional love awakened a whole new perception of self. And then supreme love just overwhelmed me. I didn't need to think about forgiving this person anymore. It was obvious. It was once impossible. It became obvious. To circle back here, for the Christian, again, if they're really committed to the teachings of Jesus, they're really pursuing a life of unconditional love, that truth right there will lead them to a higher truth if they remain dedicated. If you seek, you will find. I wholeheartedly believe that.
I think the difference that's hard to overcome for most people is you have to decide if you're truly identifying with Jesus's teachings or if you're truly identifying with institutionalized Christianity. Because if you're identifying with institutionalized Christianity, it's really hard to get more, gain more understanding, expand into these ideas of what Jesus was trying to teach within a parable that has layers and layers and layers of insight. And instead, it's just like, but this is the literal version that I was given, and I must defend this to the death. And so it depends which path you're going, whether or not you're going to be opened up to the next level, I believe. And it reminds me of something you talk about in your book, you writing about the amnesia of self being necessary for authentic human experience. How did this change the way that you viewed your own past traumas and challenges? How did this change the way that you viewed your own past traumas and challenges?
What ended up happening was when I was really going through my own struggles and processing my own traumas, it was like long-standing pain that I had been working through. And in this realization that I'm an individual expression of spirit having the human experience, it just unlocked a different awareness for what I'm actually doing and who I identify with. So identifying with the worldly sense of self, you really view the human experience as like the truth, the totality of the experience. It feels so real. How could it possibly be anything other than real? But in the expanded awareness of spirit, being an individual expression of spirit, and understanding that God is all that there is, which is supreme in nature, which is love. So in understanding that love is all that is, it's learning to reconcile that. It's like, love is all that there is, but what about all that trauma I experienced? What about all that pain I experienced? What like that is very real, right? It's really marrying those two things. But you get to that point where you realize that love is all that exists. But fear is a really important experience to have, because it's in the fear that you can experience a greater depth of unconditional love. And so that experience must happen in some way. but it can't happen in highest spiritual true reality. It cannot exist because God is all that exists. Love is all that exists. Fear cannot exist except within an illusion. It must be this way. This is just how I view reality, is that love is all that exists, but in spirit's own, or unified consciousness, whatever you want to call it, in the exploration of supreme nature, there must be an experience of fear so that you can show love in the face of fear. It's a higher expression of love. Love is expressed in so many different ways, right? You love pizza, you can love your family, you can love your enemy. These are different they're different layers of love. And loving your enemy requires surrendering your sense of self. It's surrendering your ego. That is how you are enabled. That's how you are empowered. You are compelled to love the person who hurt you the most in these higher realizations. This is a different expression of love. Again, it requires the experience of fear, but fear can't exist. The hell cannot exist in highest, truest reality, but it's important to experience. It must be experienced in some way. And that, so yeah, you could call that an illusion. You could call that a dream. A lot of people like to call it a matrix, whatever. It doesn't, I don't care, what you call it. I think probably most precisely, I think it's most like a dream. To circle back on the amnesia piece though, to have this experience, you can't know yourself to be God to have the authentic experience. Like the game is up. As soon as you realize, oh, I'm an individual expression of spirit having a human experience and love is all that exists, that the game is up, right there. When you fully really recognize that and realize that experience. So I just got to this point where I was just like, amnesia is a necessary experience. But really what it is I view it as it's just a limited conscious awareness. It's really like you just don't realize how expansive you are. So it's not even necessarily that this experience is completely not real. This is where I view the importance of having, or the awareness of there being a dualistic and a non-dualistic perspective, right? In the dualistic perspective, in this universe that we live in, that there's a separation, there's an individual sense of self in this realm of duality. It's a necessary experience to fully immerse yourself in that experience, to learn the lessons that you need to learn to evolve and to grow. When you become aware of the non-dualistic perspective that actually all is one, is massively important for living your most optimal life. But the whole experience, for it to be authentic, it does require that amnesia prior to greater realization of who you are. That's kind of how I view all that.
I agree. I was just talking to somebody yesterday, actually. She was going through a hard time, and I was sharing one of the visualizations that I use when I'm really struggling with another human. And I just picture our souls up there having the choice before we incarnate into this world. And I'm like, I really want to experience, and this comes from the little soul, but I love the visualizations. It's like, I really want to experience forgiveness, or I really want to experience stepping into my power. Well, the only way that you can experience stepping into your power is to understand what it feels like to not be in your power, which means that your life has to take an evolution that goes through the darkness back into the light so that you actually know how amazing it is to be in the light. Otherwise, you're just the light. You don't really know anything different. And so when I'm having a really difficult time with a really difficult person, at least my human views that person as a difficult person, what if I pictured them taking that sacrifice? All of a sudden, it's like they're going to incarnate to be the most difficult person I've ever dealt with, so that I can experience the opposite. And then when you look at it that way, it's like, oh my God, this person had to incarnate into a whole lifetime of being in that personality in order to be my shadow for a moment. And if you look at it that way, then that person is so unconditionally loved and loving me in order to play that role in this lifetime so that we can come out blossomed into what we needed to experience in this lifetime. Suddenly, it's just a lot easier to love the most difficult person in your whole life because they were the catalyst to everything that you needed to become.
100%. This is where, and this is where I found very true, genuine gratitude for the person who hurt me the most. Like, this person, again, from the human perspective, hurt me so much pain, an extraordinary amount of emotional, a lot of pain. In the greater realization, though, that's exactly what I needed. That is precisely what I needed. That pain, everything that person did, they did it so like it's exactly what propelled me into this self-awakening experience. Gratitude. Thank you so much. I needed that exact experience. And so, and then at least, for me, when I view this person, not only did they perform their role in my life exactly how I needed, so gratitude, but in the realization that this person is still very identified with their worldly sense of self. And I have the awareness that ego experience invites so much hell. Compassion. I have nothing but gratitude and compassion. And obviously, and forgiveness is obvious. Love is obvious. But when you have that experience, you look at the person who hurt you this is a miracle, by the way. This is like the shift in energy. This is a miracle that happened in my life. It sounds like it's happened in your life as well. But yeah, to really experience true, genuine energy of compassion and gratitude for the person who hurt you the most, this is true power. So that expansive awareness just changes everything in how you view other people. And then if you can look at the person who hurt you the most with supreme love, how are you going to view everyone else?
Well, in the moment that you look at them, because I think there's layers to this. There was an earlier stage where I'm like, yes, you know what? I can see the beauty and the purpose of all of that pain. And I can feel gratitude that I went through it, but it's still difficult to have gratitude for the person, even though I'm like, okay, yeah, they were necessary. But the moment that you can actually see the divinity in that person, where you choose to witness it in them, because in witnessing it in them, you're automatically unlocking it in yourself. Because if you feel judgment, you're closing your heart. And so you're feeling judgment. You're the one holding judgment. You're not like projecting it out onto a person. You are holding judgment. So this is all a inner transformation of then being like, actually, there's God in you. And every now and then with those people, it's almost like, I almost picture our souls like winking at each other. Okay, yeah, you trigger me more than anybody else, but oh, there's that little divine wink that I felt. I know that's in there. And if I am holding that faith that God is in everything, then I get to experience the world as God being in everything rather than me walking through and accidentally falling into a pit of darkness and coming out of it. And oh my God, it's like, there's just, you're right. It's the illusion dissolves a little bit. And I feel like you can start living in this realm with a foot in both, realizing that you need the duality in order to actually experience all of these physical and metaphysical transformations, but also you can hold this understanding that God is all of it and that none of it is evil, even if sometimes that's all you can see, if that makes sense.
And this is where I think like one of the most critical perspectives of life, when you see the truth of oneness, one of the most critical perspectives is, like you were saying, there's kind of like one foot in each realm almost. It's like, for me, I always try to maintain the awareness of absolute truth, that we are all expressions of God. This is a powerful truth to always have in mind and heart, when you interact with people, but also grounded in the relative experience. I am still John Rainey. I mean, John Rainey is the experience that I am having, but I'm here to be the best spouse to my wife. I'm here to be the best father to my son. I'm here to be the best neighbor I can possibly be. That's the experience that I'm having. That's the relative individual experience that I'm having. Now, in my awareness, I know that I'm one with all, and I know that we are all individual expressions of spirit. And this allows that flow that you're talking about. It's like going about your life, seeing the divinity in everyone. This is highly powerful. It just opens up your heart space, love and compassion for everyone. But also, it's like you could take like the super spiritual path and become like like a secluded, spiritual person, like a monk or something like that, and just kind of transcend the human experience altogether. I don't think that's very realistic for most individuals, especially if you have a family. At least for me, I remain grounded in that relative experience with the awareness of absolute truth. I think is so critical on the conscious spiritual journey.
Well, I love leaving listeners with a thought or an action to kind of ground all of this into reality. What would you leave them with? Something to mull over or something to do?
There's so much. I mean, there's these little nuggets that I've picked up just along the way in terms of like trusting your intuition and speaking your truth. And there's so many nuggets. But I guess one thing that I would encourage listeners with is I think it's really, really good to read books. I mean, as we've discussed, it's like books have played a huge role in our own journeys, and they're so important. It's good to listen to podcasts and to explore truth. But for me, one of the most powerful experiences in all of this was really taking my journey inward and learning to trust my intuition. I have so much gratitude for different authors like Joseph Campbell, David Hawkins, and Alan Watts, and so much more. But when I decided to release all external sources, I don't rely on trusting on this or that. I go inward and trust my intuition. That has been such a powerful unlock. And to take it one step further, actually, I do cultivate this practice of contemplating and meditating, visualizing, and even manifesting. I do this on a daily basis. I spend a lot of time doing this. And so it might sound extreme to a lot of people, like how much time I spend doing this on a daily basis. But if you can get into a good rhythm of really connecting with your higher sense of your higher conscious awareness, your higher self, however you view it, and you really contemplate whatever it is you need to contemplate. It doesn't matter. Whatever is pressing on your mind at the moment. Maybe it does pertain to your spiritual journey. Maybe it pertains to something that triggered your ego. Maybe you're exploring the truth of Jesus. Whatever that looks like. Really cultivating a practice of processing with full trust of your in your intuition. I can't overemphasize how powerful that's been in my life. Daily, just visualizing and contemplating. For me personally, this is actually verbal processing. I have like voice notes on my phone. I just like record voice notes every single day. Typically like 1 to 3 hours a day. Doing this practice has completely changed my life, and that might sound intense, but when you really get into it, I love it. It's completely life-giving to me. So I guess trusting your intuition and going on your inner journey and really processing and contemplating through your life, whatever you're going through, ego triggers, life path, purpose, whatever that is, to really, you are your own savior. You are, and you have infinite intelligence on your side if you give yourself the opportunity to listen. So that's probably the most powerful thing that's helped me spiritually mature and evolve.
I have a similar process. Lots of voice notes, maybe not 1 to 3 hours a day, but sometimes it's close to 1. And yeah, I hear you. It's just, what is your process that helps you hear yourself better? Because we spend so long in our lives learning to disconnect from our inner guidance that it's a real process getting it back. And so that's why journaling is so powerful for some people. I prefer voice notes. I think it's my ADD. I like voice notes, and then I organize the voice notes in text. And so I love that. And I think it's super, super helpful. For listeners that are resonating with you and want to find you online, where's the best place to connect?
Well, you can check out my Instagram, which is Saint_Rainey. And I just came out with my first book, Finding God, Losing God, Becoming God. So you can check that out. That goes into a little bit of my personal journey, but also explores the truth of oneness and non-duality, and also explores interpreting the story of Jesus with the understanding of Christ consciousness. One other thing additionally, I'm actually launching my own podcast, which is called House of Saint Rainey. So those are some different ways that you could connect with me.
Episode links are at mindlove.com/403. Your challenge for this week is to get honest about the story you're living inside, and not the one you post online, the one that runs through your mind when things get quiet. And ask yourself, is this my story or the one I inherited? Even when it comes to God. Because once you see the story, you can shift it. And once you shift it, everything else moves with it. So give it a try and let me know how it goes. And if this conversation opens something in you, or if you're starting to see your own story in a new light, reclaiming it is exactly what we do inside Story Love. It's where you learn to reclaim your truth, craft your signature story, and share it in a way that actually resonates. Whether you're building a brand, speaking on podcasts, or just tired of hiding the real you. So much healing goes into claiming your story. One client inside actually said, I felt like I owned it. It was my moment. I was no longer the victim. So claiming your story can feel like it's changing your past. I should say integrating it, embodying the wisdom instead of playing to the victim. And when you share that story, you don't just change your life, you shift the consciousness of everyone who hears it. So if that speaks to you, DM me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa and I'll send you the details. You can find all of my amazing sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Morning Mind Love at mindlove.com, or just text the word morning to 33777. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.